Story 1. The Phantom Killer of Texarkana. Texarkana, a small town straddling the border of Texas and Arkansas, was once a quiet community where everyone knew each other by name and face. But in the spring of 1946, the town was gripped by months of terror, haunted by a mysterious murderer who would later be remembered by a chilling name, the Phantom Killer. It all began on the night of the 22nd of February, 1946. A young couple, Jimmy Hollis and his girlfriend Mary Jeannie Larry, parked on a secluded road to talk privately. Suddenly, a strange man appeared. He wore a rough white sack over his head, with only 2 small eye holes cut out, making him look both ghost-like and medieval, like an executioner. Without a word, he pointed a gun at the couple and forced them out of the car. He brutally beat Jimmy until he was unconscious, then turned to torment Mary Jean. Strangely, he let her live. But Mary's testimony about the masked attacker sparked a nightmare for the entire town. Just 3 weeks later, on the night of the 24th of March, another couple, Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore, were found dead in their car on a deserted road. Both had been shot in the head with a .32 caliber pistol. The scene was cold, calculated, and left no clear evidence. Police began to suspect this was not a random attack, but the work of a serial killer stalking young couples in the dark. The fear escalated on the 13th of April, when Paul Martin and his girlfriend Betty Jo Booker, a talented high school saxophonist, vanished after a dance. The next day, Paul's body was discovered on the roadside with 4 gunshot wounds. A few miles away, Betty Jo's body was found in the woods, fatally shot in the head and chest. The town was shaken to its core. Now, people were convinced a predator was on the loose, targeting young lovers. The nightmare reached its peak on May 3, 1946. A married couple, Virgil and Katie Starks, were at home in their rural farmhouse. As Virgil sat listening to the radio, a bullet crashed through the window, killing him instantly. Katie panicked and tried to flee, but was shot twice. Miraculously, she survived and managed to reach a neighbor's house for help. This attack proved the Phantom was no longer limiting himself to couples in parked cars. He could strike anyone, anywhere. After this, Texarkana descended into chaos. Residents bought guns, locked their doors, and refused to go out after dark. Streets once lively at night turned eerily deserted. The press named him the Phantom Killer, a murderer like a ghost, appearing and vanishing without a trace. Local police and the Texas Rangers launched an intensive investigation. They pursued hundreds of leads and interrogated numerous suspects, but every trail went cold. One man, Ewell Swinney, was heavily suspected after his wife claimed he was the Phantom. But since spousal testimony wasn't admissible in court, he was never convicted of the murders. Instead, Swinney was imprisoned for car theft, while the Phantom case remained unsolved. The details of the Phantom Killer became infamous. The white hood covering his face, the .32 caliber pistol, his habit of striking at night, and his ability to disappear as if he never existed. Theories circulated. Some believed he was a wandering madman. Others thought he was a local resident, familiar with the town's routines. Some even speculated he was a war veteran, unable to adjust to civilian life, channeling his violence into hunting young couples. But the truth was never revealed. After May 1946, the Phantom Killer simply vanished, never to strike again. No one knows if he died, was arrested for another crime, or simply chose to stop. Texarkana lived on, in the shadow of those terrifying months. In 1976, the story was adapted into the horror film The Town That Dreaded Sundown, cementing the Phantom Killer as a bloody legend in American crime history. To this day, the case remains one of the nation's great mysteries, a serial killer who terrorized an entire town, then disappeared as if he never existed. Story 2. The Cleveland Torso Murders. In the 1932nd, during the Great Depression, the bustling industrial city of Cleveland, Ohio, became the stage for one of the most gruesome and terrifying murder sprees in American history. The killer was nicknamed the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, but today criminologists and the media know him by another name: the Cleveland Torso Murderer. It all began in September 1934, when the body of a man was found on a grassy area near Lake Erie. But it wasn't a complete body. The victim had been dismembered, his head severed, and the flesh of his torso washed clean. Just a few months later, in January 1935, more body parts were discovered in the Kingsbury Run area, a squalid, low-lying district known for its homeless camps and petty criminals. From then on, the nightmare escalated. Between 1935 and 1938, at least 12 victims were officially attributed to the torso murderer, though many researchers believe the real number could be 20 or more. The victims all shared the same horrific fate: decapitation, dismemberment, and in many cases, their heads were never recovered. The killer targeted society's most vulnerable: the homeless, prostitutes, and working-class poor. Some victims were never identified at all, remembered only by nicknames like the Lady of the Lake or Victim Number 6. His brutality and cold precision sent shockwaves through the entire city. What set these murders apart was the surgical precision of the mutilations. The cuts were clean, deliberate, and skillful, suggesting that the killer possessed medical or anatomical knowledge. Some victims were castrated or even flayed before death, showing that the murderer wasn't merely killing, but indulging in a sadistic, almost ritualistic desecration of the human body. The Cleveland police mobilized hundreds of officers to investigate. The case gained even more notoriety when a legendary figure in American law enforcement took charge: Eliot Ness, the famed leader of the Untouchables, who had helped bring down Al Capone. In 1935, Ness was appointed Cleveland's public safety director, and he immediately faced the torso killings. He launched massive raids on Kingsbury Run, arrested hundreds of suspects, searched mental hospitals, and even ordered the burning of homeless shanty camps in an attempt to deprive the murderer of his hunting ground. Yet, despite his relentless efforts, Ness never caught the killer, casting a lasting shadow over his otherwise celebrated career. Among the main suspects was Dr. Francis Sweeney, a former Army surgeon with a history of mental illness and erratic behavior. Crucially, he possessed the medical knowledge needed to carry out the precise mutilations. Ness personally interrogated Sweeney for days, but there was never enough evidence to charge him. Soon after, Sweeney was committed to a mental institution, and eerily, the killings seemed to stop. Still, no definitive conclusion was ever reached. Some researchers are convinced Sweeney was the torso murderer, while others insist the truth remains more complicated. For decades afterward, whenever unidentified body parts washed ashore on Lake Erie or were found in the woods, whispers of the torso murderer resurfaced. The impact of the crimes went far beyond the body count. The murders instilled paralyzing fear in Cleveland. Residents avoided Kingsbury Run after dark. Newspapers drew comparisons to London's Jack the Ripper, and the city lived under a cloud of dread. To this day, the case remains unsolved. The true identity of the Cleveland torso murderer may have died with the killer, or may never have been known at all. What is certain is that this brutal phantom, capable of killing, dismembering, and vanishing in the heart of a major city, remains one of America's most chilling unsolved mysteries. Story 3. Jack the Stripper, the Hammersmith Nude Murders. London in the 1962. The capital of England was living through an era of social upheaval. Rock music was exploding, the women's liberation movement was spreading, and organized crime was thriving everywhere. But amid this energy, the city became haunted by a string of brutal murders. The press called the killer Jack the Stripper, a name deliberately echoing the infamous Jack the Ripper from a century earlier. From 1964 to 1965, at least 6 women, most of them sex workers, were found dead, completely naked, in West London around Hammersmith and Chiswick. No clothes, no jewelry, their bodies were dumped coldly in scrapyards along the Thames or in dark alleyways. This stark nudity led the press to dub the crimes the Nude murders. The first victim was discovered in February 1964. Hannah Tailford, age 30, found under a pier near the Thames with a cloth stuffed in her mouth. A few months later came the next, Irene Lockwood, 26, also floating in the river under the same circumstances. Soon after, more women were murdered. Among them was 2-year-old Helen Barthélemy, the third victim, found in a small alley, her body dusted with industrial paint particles, a strange clue that became a vital lead. The victims shared more than just their profession. Each had been strangled to death, then stripped completely naked. Some bore signs of violence, but there was no evidence of rape. It seemed the killer wasn't driven by sexual desire, but by a twisted need to degrade and humiliate, leaving their corpses as some kind of sick proclamation. London police launched one of the biggest manhunts of the era. They combed through files of thousands of men with violent or sexual offense records, questioned brothel clients, and focused heavily on the paint dust clue. Investigators believed the killer might work in the automotive or paint industry. One prime suspect was Mungo Ireland, a garage worker living near the crime scenes. When the investigation intensified, Ireland suddenly killed himself in his car using carbon monoxide, leaving a note saying he couldn't handle the pressure. Many suspected he was Jack the Stripper. But contradictions arose. He had alibis for some of the murders, and his profile didn't fit the calculated, cold methods of the killer. Another theory pointed toward the police themselves. Some believed the killer might have been a serving officer or someone closely tied to law enforcement, since he always evaded capture, erased his tracks, and seemed to anticipate investigative moves. Yet, no concrete proof was ever found. The final victim, 7-year-old Bridget O'Hara, was found in a scrapyard in 1965. Like Helen, her body was also coated in industrial paint dust, reinforcing the theory of a factory connection. But after her death, something eerie happened. The murders abruptly stopped. No more victims. The killer simply vanished. This sudden silence fueled speculation. Had he died like Mungo Ireland? Was he imprisoned for another crime? Or had he simply satisfied his perverse obsession and chosen to stop? No one truly knows. What makes Jack the Stripper one of the most mysterious serial killers in history is the brevity yet horror of his spree. In less than 2 years, he murdered at least 6 women, spread terror across London, and then disappeared as if he had never existed. To this day, the Nude murders remain one of Britain's great unsolved cases. Modern criminologists compare him to Jack the Ripper. Both preyed on prostitutes, both left their victims as grotesque messages, and both slipped through the hands of justice. The name Jack the Stripper, mocking yet terrifying, is a reminder that true monsters sometimes hide in plain sight, and justice doesn't always catch up with them. Mysterious killers like the Phantom Killer, the Cleveland Torso Murderer, or Jack the Stripper vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only questions with no answers. Were they lone predators? Or were there more hidden hands at play in the darkness? If you found these cases chilling but fascinating, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow World Mystery Podcast as we continue opening more dark files from across the globe. Because many more mysteries are still waiting to be uncovered.